Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 369 for June 12th, 2025. Hey everyone, Dino Rubino here, joined with Zac Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. This week we'll be going through, of course, all the latest news on Windows 11 and some Copilot news, which just happened a few hours ago. We'll also go over the big gaming weekend we just had with the Xbox Ally officially being announced. We'll go over that, what we think about it, what it means for handheld gaming as a continuation of our conversation from last week. Apple also had a big week with its WWDC, where it announced its new operating system numbering system, which was interesting. And we'll talk about that, as well as Apple's liquid glass, which is causing some conversations on the internet, as well as the lack of AI in Siri. Speaking of, the iPad is also possibly becoming a real PC now. Maybe not, but it is headed in that direction. And we'll probably round out with talking about how Microsoft is, oddly enough, giving up on Microsoft Build, at least in Seattle, which is the second city it's given up on. And we'll go over the reasons for that and what that could possibly mean in the future of that event going forward. Zac, how are you doing on this fine Thursday?
I'm not too bad. Now, quickly, Dan, I'm going to pause there because people are telling me that they can't hear me. Chat, can you let me know? I thought I may have fixed it as Dan was talking, but can you just confirm for me if you can hear me? You can hear me, can't you, Dan?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know if the chat can. So if the video audience can't hear me, then I've got to fix it somehow. Can you hear Zac? Okay, so apparently they can hear me. All right, so I'll just pick up from where we just said. Yeah, I'm not too bad. I've been pretty good. Been writing a bunch of reviews this week. I'm excited that it's Friday tomorrow. It's been a busy couple of weeks with WWDC and Google I/O and Build, all sort of happening in the span of a week or two. We're finally at the end of that now, and so we can sort of chillax a little bit and stop responding to all of these other companies announcing things that are going to destroy Microsoft's tech. How are you doing, Dan?
Not too bad. It's funny. I have my own little personal drama. So, as people know, we get review samples in for laptops, and I don't do nearly as much as I used to anymore, just due to timing and stuff. Although I'm going to start to try to do a little bit more because we're changing up our format a little bit. But I'm sad because Asus is asking for their ZenBook A14 back. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you've known I've talked a lot about that laptop because it's, besides the Surface Pro 11, it's the Surface Pro 11, ZenBook A14, and the ThinkPad X9 15 are my favorite laptops right now, and have been actually for quite a few weeks now. And so they want it back, and I'm really kind of sad because I don't want to send it back because I use it all the time, and it's so good. Because it's so light. It has a really nice display. It uses the Snapdragon X Plus processor, and it gets like absurd battery life. Like we're talking 10, 11 hours of like real world usage, right? But this is the first. So it's on sale right now at Best Buy. It's actually down to $750. It's the model I have, 16 gigs of RAM, I think 512 storage, OLED display, so I may trade in some of my old laptops. I'll have to do a couple of them, and then may try to have to buy my own. And it's been rare since I would buy my own laptop, but that's how much I like it, and I would miss it. So so that's going on in my life right now. Other than that, I do have a couple other review things that are coming forward too, including I think I talked about on this podcast before, the Aura display, which is it's a portable 3 display system for your laptop.
Yeah, you've mentioned it.
Yeah, so I got to take that to the office to get some photos done of it, but hopefully I can get something up there for that next week. But pretty cool device, needless to say. But let's jump into the news. Of course, the latest on Windows 11, as well as Copilot. Why don't you give us the rundown of what's happening there?
Yeah, so Windows 11 had a relatively busy week this week. We had a couple of insider builds launch, well, technically I don't know, it was on Monday. So a couple of insider builds launched on Monday. But before we get to that, let's talk about the announcement that basically just happened a couple of hours ago. Copilot Vision is now generally available if you live in the US. So yes, Copilot Vision, which was announced a handful of weeks / months ago, is a feature coming to Windows 11 that lets Copilot see what's on your screen and then help you sort of navigate through that app. So it doesn't directly reach in and interact with the app for you, but it will highlight certain elements on the screen for you to manually click on. So you could be in, say, Photoshop, for example, and you could ask Copilot to, hey, help me blur the background of this image in Photoshop, and then Copilot will be clever enough to go, hey, so you need to click up here, you need to press that button, and you can adjust that there, and you can follow what it says and complete the task, which is really nice. Excuse me. Unfortunately, like I said, it's US only. It is generally available now. So if you are a Windows user, you should be able to open up the Copilot app on Windows, and you should see a pair of glasses, I think it is, as an icon. You click on that, and that will launch Copilot Vision. And it will then, you basically give it permission to see everything on your screen. And then from there, you can ask it questions as you go about your day. It's a cool idea in concept. I've not had a chance to use it in practice because obviously I'm not in the United States and I haven't figured out how to enable it outside of that region. I'm not sure if Dan's given it a chance either because, like I said, it literally only just started rolling out today if you weren't testing it in preview. But it's a cool idea. And I think, Copilot Vision is a feature that also works in Edge as a separate thing. And it's also a feature that works on your phone using the camera so you can point at things in the real world and ask Copilot questions about what it can see. And, this is something everyone's doing. Google's doing it on Android. Apple will eventually be doing it on their platforms, I'm sure. It's what's current right now in regards to AI. So it's good to see Microsoft finally shipping this to the public. And do you see yourself using this at all, Dan?
I don't know. So far, I've had it on a few devices. I think it's come and go. I just checked on what I'm using right now, and of course, it did an update, and it does have the little glasses. It's definitely a neat idea. I think for some people, it can definitely be helpful. But I don't really recall the last time I was looking at something in my computer and I didn't know what I was looking at. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of situations where I would like this. So like the circle to search that Android has kind of makes sense because, and this feature is coming to Copilot too. Actually, I don't know if it's on the mobile version yet, but where you can use your camera to scan either a photo or real world streaming with the camera. Yeah. And you can ask it questions. That I find useful because there are things I interact with in the world, which I'm confused about, or I don't know about it, or I want more information of. And there I find this technology just awesome. I've mentioned this before with Circle to Search, that there was a component for our bed that broke and I wanted a replacement part. I just scanned a photo, took a picture of it, scanned it, and it was able to find me a replacement on eBay. I had a pump go for our AC system. Same thing, scan that. So that technology I think is just incredibly useful. But in this situation, I don't really see myself using it that often because, like I said, sometimes if I come across something as a photo, I guess maybe in that situation, but I used to use like reverse photo searching and stuff like that, right? Which you can even do in Bing. You just copy paste a screenshot in there. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, so that's basically the news for Copilot Vision, generally available if you're in the US. No word on when it's coming to other regions. Hopefully, it will roll out more broadly in the coming weeks and months. Microsoft does seem to be taking all of these AI features. They're taking their rollout carefully for reasons. I'm sure the EU has so much red tape around there in regards to AI and privacy and stuff, so they probably have to just take it slow there. But yeah, hopefully it rolls out to more markets soon. All right, let's move on to the Insider stuff. Not too many huge things going on in Insider, but there are some noticeable changes in the this week's build, starting with the new start menu, which has been announced and we've talked about to death at this point, but it's now finally officially rolling out in the dev channel and beta channel for testing. And it's the first time we actually sort of get Microsoft's long sort of in-depth description of what this new start menu is all about. So I'll read what they've said about the new start menu because I do think it's quite interesting. They said, we're making it easier for you to launch your apps with our updated scrollable start menu. With all now in the top level, apps are easily accessible without having to navigate to a secondary page. In addition, we're introducing 2 new views to browse and launch your installed apps via the All section, Category and Grid view. The new default category will automatically automatically group your apps by category for quick access to your most used categories and apps. So if your most used apps are Outlook and Solitaire, you can expect those apps to bubble up to the top in their respective categories. Categories are formed when there are at least 3 apps in each respective category. Otherwise, they will remain in the other category. Now, that's really interesting what they say there, because I've been testing this start menu for a little while. You've been able to enable it unofficially for some time. And it frustrates me so much that most of my apps get thrown into the other category. I thought it was broken. Turns out it's by design, because if you have less than 3 apps that are a part of another category, they just get put together in other. And I hate that. I think that's a silly way to organize that. It should just be, if there is an app that sets its own category, it should just be part of that category. It doesn't matter if it's one app only in that category. I think it makes more sense to put it there, because people will be looking for that versus throwing, I have VS Code and it goes into other because it's like a software development tool, and it's the only one I have installed. So it goes into other rather than, something more useful. So I would like Microsoft to change that. If you're listening, Microsoft, don't make it do that, because that doesn't make any sense. I don't think the iOS shelf does that. I don't think the start menu should do that either. And then they also say that they are making it better, making sure the new start menu makes better use of your screen real estate by adapting the size of the start menu based on your screen size. If you have a large screen device, you can expect to see a larger start menu by default, so you can see more of your apps and files. On larger devices, users can expect to see 8 columns of pinned apps, 6 recommendations, and 4 columns of categories in the start menu. On smaller devices, you'll see 6 columns, 4 recommendations, and 3 columns of categories, which makes sense. So if you're using a laptop, the start menu will roughly be the same size as it always has been. If you're using a desktop PC with a 24, 28, 32-inch display or bigger, it will be a much larger menu, which makes sense to me. Sadly, it's still not like manually resizable. You can't make it bigger or smaller based on how you could do with Windows 10, but I guess this is better than nothing. They also highlight how you can now finally turn off the recommended feed, which is good. So if you've never been a fan of that sort of middle section with the recommended stuff, you can turn that off. And then they also talk about the phone link panel, which is now shipping to the old start menu, but the new start menu will have a button that lets you just hide that panel on the fly. So if you don't want someone seeing your phone link stuff, you can quickly press the button in the start menu and it will collapse it. And then when that person's gone away, you can reveal your phone link panel again and look at all of your notifications. So that's kind of nice. Dan, any thoughts on this?
I like the resizable start menu thing, or at least rather it's more scalable.
Yeah.
Speaking of that ZenBook A14, because it's a 1920 by 1200, I think, resolution, and it has a 16 by 10 aspect. That on a 14-inch can look big, and things kind of scale differently on it. And so sometimes components in Windows may look larger or just off in terms of scaling. And you and I have talked about that before with the different resolutions and stuff like that on laptops, how it can cause sort of issues. Even the Surface Pro 12 would benefit from this, right? The 12-inch, I should say. So yeah, I think that's kind of cool. I didn't even think about the button for the phone thing in start menu, but that actually makes a lot of sense, just to be able to quickly toggle it on and off instead of going to settings and just disabling it. So I think it's cool. It's funny, we did have in one of our meetings this week, we were talking about this new start menu, and myself and Mauro, one of our writers, were talking about how neither of us actually use the start menu.
Yeah, a lot of people say that.
Yeah, and it's like, I bring it up and it's like, it's not that it doesn't look good or anything. It's just I pin my most used apps to my taskbar, and that's 90% of what 90% of what I'm using a computer for is like definitely web browser. That's the overwhelming majority.
Yeah.
Then it'll be something like Slack, Telegram, Notepad, and then just a couple other apps, some social apps like Twitter and stuff like that, which I use as a PWA, which is still technically the browser, WhatsApp or something like that. So my need to, and then of course Copilot, which I use all the time, but my need to go to the start menu then is pretty limited. Like it's only when I need that one app. And even when I do that, all I'm doing is hitting start and typing the name of the app, right? I'm not even scrolling.
Yeah, I would say the start menu is an old design at this point. It's the only operating system left that has essentially a start menu, a separate menu where you go for pinned apps. It doesn't really make sense. If you think about other platforms like Mac and iPad and Android, the home screen is really your start menu on those platforms. Like on the Mac OS, the dock is basically your start menu. And I think a lot of Windows users treat the taskbar as their start menu now. They pin all of the apps that they want to use the most on the taskbar. And then the start menu really should just be an all apps list, which is what it is on Android. And it's what it is on iOS and iPad OS. And so, yeah, the start menu is an old design. And, Microsoft tried to evolve it with Windows 8 and everybody hated that. I think if they tried again these days, I don't know if people would be so upset. But yeah, back when they did try to reinvent the start menu, it was met with a lot of backlash, which is why they don't really mess with it much these days. But I do think we're in a new era now where the start menu is redundant. I think everybody agrees the start menu is redundant. It's unnecessary. And so I would like to see Microsoft completely rethink it in a future version of Windows. I don't see why they couldn't, because everyone uses the taskbar as a place to pin all of their most used apps. And so the only time you'd ever go to the start menu is if you wanted to go into your all apps list to find an app you don't use as often. And so being able to pin apps in the start menu doesn't make any sense. It's like, why? I've already pinned all these to the start to the taskbar. And so I think you're not alone there, Dan. I think very few people actually use the start menu or take the time to customize it. I do, because I like to make it look nice. Even though I'm probably in the same boat, I probably don't open the start menu to open anything really, unless I'm going to search for an app or I'm going into the all apps list because I can't find the app I'm looking for. Because otherwise, basically, if I look at my start menu, everything in my start menu that's pinned is also pinned in my taskbar.
Right.
It's like,
exactly.
I just spent 10 minutes making my start menu look nice for no reason, because I'm never going to open it. But I guess maybe I'm in the minority there. But and I guess it's also one of those things, because we have to remember the majority of Windows users are not technical enthusiasts. They're not people like us. They're normal people who don't really care. And maybe they don't pin things to the taskbar. Maybe Microsoft has data to suggest a lot of people who just aren't tech heads are still going to the start menu to pin their apps and going in there to click and open apps. Maybe that's the case. I don't know, but I do think the start menu itself is an old design. Right, let's move on to some other changes to these insider builds. So they've finally started rolling out the updated lock screen widget stuff to more than just the European Economic Area. So people in the US and the UK can now start testing this as well. And this is really cool. I'm very excited for these widget updates. Microsoft is letting you actually customize the widgets that appear on the lock screen. Up until now, it has been the widgets that appear there are fixed and you can't change them, you can't organize them, you can't move them around. But now you will be able to. And I've actually got this in testing on my PC, and it's really cool. So you can, there's up to 4 apps you can pin, and you can get rid of all of them if you want, or you can swap them out. So I've swapped one of mine out for the phone link widget. And so whenever I lock my computer, I can see on the bottom of the lock screen weather, stocks, news, and phone link, and it shows me an overview of my phone, my battery percentage, and connection status and stuff. And I think that's really cool that you can just see that on the lock screen now, and you can obviously move them around as well. So if I wanted phone link at the front, you could do that, or if I wanted it at the back, which is where I've got it currently, you can do that as well, which is really cool. And that's basically it. Microsoft did also announce that they are rolling out some improvements to the login and keyboard experiences for people using Windows on handhelds / with controllers. You'll now finally be able to log into Windows using a gamepad, which, believe it or not, is something you couldn't do up until these insider builds. And I think this is partly tied to the big announcements Microsoft made in regards to gaming on Windows, specifically handhelds on Windows this week. This is something we talked about last week. On Sunday, Microsoft announced big changes coming to Windows later this year / 2026 that will benefit Windows-powered gaming handhelds. And they even announced the first Xbox ecosystem handheld, the Asus ROG Xbox Ally and the Xbox Ally X. So 2 devices, both Xbox branded. Both will be the first to ship with these Windows improvements. We'll start with the Windows improvements, then we'll get into the hardware, because I think that's I think the Windows stuff to me is more interesting than the hardware itself, but obviously some people disagree. But it's my show, so I can do what I want. So let's start with the Windows stuff. Microsoft announced some big stuff. So first of all, they did announce a brand new interface for these handhelds. This is one of the biggest complaints people have had with Windows handhelds, is that trying to navigate Windows on these 7-inch displays, it's a pain in the back. It's really difficult. Windows is just not designed for screen sizes that small, and the Windows shell really isn't really designed for gamepad input control as well. So Microsoft is addressing that by building a dedicated handheld UI mode for gaming handhelds, and it's, to our knowledge, built into the Xbox app. It will essentially just run the Xbox app full screen, but there's more to it than just that. The Xbox app will actually kill background activities, including the Windows desktop, so that the only services running are ones that benefit the gaming experience. So it will kill Windows Update. It would, well, maybe not Windows Update specifically, but it will kill background services that are irrelevant to the gaming experience, that being the Xbox app and the game you want to run, as well as third-party storefronts, of course. And it will remove, it will kill the Windows shell, so you won't see the taskbar or the start menu. It will get rid of your wallpaper, and it will just have the Xbox interface, the handheld interface that they've designed, which we actually have a look at here. So this is what it looks like. Again, it's very similar to the Xbox dashboard, except on the left-hand side, there's like a little menu where you can go through all your different things. So your game library, your game streaming, the Microsoft Store, etc., etc. At the top right, you get your microphone, Wi-Fi, and battery indicator, as well as the date and time. So the taskbar, like I said, is gone, and those system tray elements are now on the top right of the display. And Microsoft has also said they're going to add a new sort of alt-tab view for handheld, so you can quickly switch between games and stuff, which is kind of nice as well. But this is some big stuff. This is a big deal. This is still Windows Desktop. It's still Windows 11 Home or Windows 11 Pro, I guess, if you buy some handhelds. But it's the Xbox app. It sort of takes control of the experience, and it reduces background services and makes the device easier to use with handheld, gaming controllers and whatnot. And so this is a huge commitment on both the Windows team and the Xbox team. There's collaboration going on here. I think Phil Spencer's gone on record to say, in his 25 years of being at Microsoft, he's never seen the Xbox and Windows teams work so closely together. And I think this is just the start. What we're seeing here is very much just changes to Windows Desktop, but I think down the line we could absolutely see a dedicated new edition of Windows for gaming. This is just the start, and so that's really, really interesting. Let's see what Microsoft says here in their blog post. So obviously they wrote a blog post on the Xbox website. Xbox players can look forward to approachable gaming experiences that travel wherever you go, featuring several new and first-of-their-kind features on both the Xbox Ally devices and eventually other devices as well. So this will start as an exclusive to the Xbox Ally and the Xbox Ally X, but they fully intend to roll this out to other gaming handhelds, likely throughout 2026. So there's an immersive Xbox full screen experience, an aggregated gaming library with access to install games from leading PC storefronts, and more. We've optimized Windows 11 to be easy to use on the Xbox Ally and Ally X from the moment you power on. Game Bar makes it easy to return home, browse your library, launch your quick games, chat with friends, open apps, adjust settings, and more. Now, with the integration of Asus's innovative Armory crates, Game Bar also gives you streamlined access to advanced device and input controls. Details like the lock screen and task switcher have also been adjusted for easy navigation with a controller. Because these handhelds run Windows, you have access to games you can't get elsewhere, so you can enjoy the full freedom and versatility of PC gaming, download games from your favorite storefronts, run apps like Discord, watch your favorite streamers on Twitch, and play with your favorite mods. I think Microsoft does say that with the improvements they've made behind the scenes in regards to the Xbox app killing background services and sort of reducing desktop nonsense, you might get up to 66% better performance, which is a huge gain in performance there, I think. And so, yeah, this is big. This is a big deal, and it shows Microsoft is committed to trying to make Windows run better on these devices, because that's, we all know at this point that the biggest problem these devices have faced is Windows. Windows doesn't run well on these devices. SteamOS consistently blows these devices out of the water when it comes to performance and just the user experience. And so Microsoft has been playing catch up. And, I'm very excited to see what Windows is like on these handhelds now, because, the interface does look nice. The promised improvements sound great on paper, but how is this going to work in reality? How will it be switching between the Xbox interface and the desktop interface? Is that going to be a smooth transition? Is that going to require a reboot? Like, there's lots of issues, lots of things we don't really know, because these at the end of the day, these are still Windows devices, and so you could, in theory, dock it up to an external monitor with a keyboard and mouse and use it like a PC gaming system. And so being able to boot into the Windows desktop is a nice addition to have, but how seamless will that be, etc., etc. So that's all to be remains to be seen. Like I said, the Xbox Ally and the Ally X don't launch till later this year, which means we won't see this experience until the fall at the earliest. And even then, for those of you who already have Xbox handhelds, you're not going to get these as updates until likely sometime in 2026. Dan, what are your thoughts on these announcements? Did you follow this?
Yeah, I did. Not as closely as I wanted to, but I got enough of it where, you know, like you, the software changes I think are critical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've talked about whether or not they really need to do like a whole new version of Windows or do something like this. And it sounds like this method could be good enough, right? Um,
Yeah.
Especially if it's 66%. We have to, of course, check that out, and it'll still be this like, let's compare it directly to SteamOS on the same
Yeah.
hardware and see how it performs. Uh, but I definitely like this direction. I think it's, if Microsoft came to me with this proposal and be like, well, this is what we're thinking about doing, I'd be like, all right, yeah, that works. That would persuade me to stick with Windows on these devices. Now, my only contention, of course, is what you mentioned there at the end, which are the dates, which is, this will come to the new hardware first, and then it'll come via an update to other handhelds. And I think it was the ROG Allies will get it first,
Mm-hmm.
followed by MSI Claw, followed by Lenovo Legion Go, etc. That's a little bit frustrating, because 2026, like it's not going to be like January 1st, um,
Yeah.
and we know Microsoft is how they are on shipping dates. Uh, as I talked about last week's podcast, I put SteamOS on both my gaming handhelds, and it wasn't even an issue. Like, I mean, not only was it super easy to do, but it was like it was a no brainer.
Mm-hmm.
I just like the way it works. But I'd be curious. I would absolutely give it a fair shake. Being that these devices and what's cool now with Windows and hardware, of course, is the key for my Windows is should be embedded on the hardware. So I should be able to just reinstall Windows on these things and be back to where I was before. So I'll probably end up giving it a shot based on what people are saying. But we'll see. At least they stand a chance now, I think, against SteamOS with these devices, which I guess leads us to the second half here. We're just talking about the hardware, which
Yeah.
in a way isn't groundbreaking, but the small changes that they made, I think, are pretty nice. So why don't you go over that?
Yeah, so if you've ever seen an ROG Ally, it's very similar to that. There are some differences with the hardware, starting with the fact there's now a dedicated Xbox button. So you press that will open Game Bar, similar to how the Xbox button on an Xbox controller on an Xbox opens the Xbox Guide. The Game Bar is essentially the Xbox Guide, but for Windows handhelds and PCs. They've also redesigned the grips around the edges. So the grips are much more similar to the Xbox the Xbox Series controller grips. So Microsoft says they've created the Xbox ROG Ally uses the same design principles as the Xbox wireless controller. The Xbox Ally and the Xbox Ally X feature contoured hand grips to accommodate a wide range of hand sizes. And that's basically the only real changes to the hardware, other than the fact that the internals have also been given a bit of a boost. So there's two devices: the Xbox ROG Ally and the Xbox ROG Ally X. The ROG Ally is the sort of air quotes entry level model, and I put that in air quotes because we expect these to not be cheap. Probably more than $500, probably more than
Oh yeah.
$600 maybe. It's powered by an AMD Ryzen Z2A processor with 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of M.2 SSD storage, and a 7-inch Full HD IPS display with 120 hertz refresh rate and 500 nits of peak brightness. So, mostly flagship experience there. The ROG Ally X bumps the processor from a Z2A to an AI Z2 Extreme, so that should provide more performance. It also bumps the memory from 16 gigs to 24 gigs and the storage from 512 gigs to 1 terabyte of M.2 SSD storage. The displays are the same across both, and as far as I'm aware, the display is actually the same as what's available in the current ROG Ally, the non-Xbox branded one. So not OLED displays, they are IPS, but 120 hertz is really nice to see.
And variable refresh.
And variable refresh as well, yes. And then the batteries on the standard Xbox Ally, it's 60 watts, and on the Xbox Ally X, I'm getting confused with the names. The Xbox Ally X, it's 80 watts, so a much bigger battery, but that does come at the cost of weight. It is slightly heavier, but same actual thinness and stuff, or thickness in this case, I guess. They are 50 millimeters in thickness. So they're not small. These aren't Nintendo Switches. If you're thinking of a Nintendo Switch, no, this isn't it. These are beefy PC handhelds. But that should mean good battery life, at least, especially on the Xbox Ally X. But like I said, no word on pricing. We don't know that. These devices will go up for pre-order later this year, shipping in time for the holiday season, Microsoft says. But I think the speculation around these is that they won't be cheap. Probably starting at 700, maybe 800, and the Ally X probably approaching 1,000, maybe more.
We should also point out that when this was announced, technically, this was before, I think it was on Tuesday morning, that supposedly China and the United States have an agreement on tariffs. Which is probably one reason why they wouldn't announce pricing, because who knows where things will be in 5 months, right? But now that it looks like the tariff situation should work out and we shouldn't see jacked up prices for electronics, that obviously works in favor. There's also two other things I would say. One is scalability. So the more devices they make, the lower they can do the price, right? Anytime, this is why Surfaces are also, we've talked about this before, why Surface devices tend to be expensive, because they're so customized and so unique. And there's generally low volume that it drives up the price. Whereas whenever you mass produce something, obviously the price drops. So as this category grows and the production values, should drop, we should see that pass on to customers. Then I would say the third thing to consider is how aggressive does Microsoft want to promote this thing, right? We've known for years that they sold Xbox consoles, either at a loss, which was, I think, early on, they sold them, they were losing money for every console because they were making it up for game licenses. I don't think they would probably won't do that, and they'll have to subsidize Asus. But like, how much are they going to subsidize Asus on this, right? To bring down that price and make it more competitive, because they could do that and really just kind of break even more as a way to get people to adopt these things. So probably a lot of questions there, but I think, the slightly heavier weight you mentioned, it's a trade-off for a larger battery, which I think is totally fine. I'd also say the ergonomic grips also will help with that. I mean, I've talked about the Nintendo Switch I've had, and that has the worst ergonomic design I've ever seen in any gaming handheld. But they do make third-party, I forgot the name of the company, they make these like handles that you clip on, and it looks basically just like this. They look just like that. And once I got those, it made the Switch much less portable, or at least not as convenient, but infinitely more comfortable to hold for long durations. And just for me, it kind of really changed the device to how much I enjoyed using it. So I'm actually, I would say the current handhelds, I don't really have that much of a problem with their ergonomics. In fact, the Legion Go has really good ergonomics. They're kind of rounded handles. But I think this design, is going to be awesome for how the device feels when you're using it. And because it has those bigger hand grips, the slightly increased weight won't be as noticeable. So I think they did a really good job with this. It's only a full HD display, but at that size, the PPI should be decent. The 120 hertz variable refresh, I point that out because the Legion Go has 144 hertz, but it's not variable refresh. This matters to some people. I know some people on our gaming team swear that something that plays on a variable refresh, meaning that the refresh rate adapts to the capabilities of the CPU and game at the time, looks better than something that can just go up to 144 hertz. I haven't actually directly compared. It's kind of hard because the Legion Go's screen is 8.8 inch and it's OLED. Pretty sure it's OLED. And it's so much bigger than the ROG Ally that it's like, it is different trade-offs. Like I kind of prefer the larger screen. But I think these are cool devices, and I think this is such a fascinating category, right? So,
yeah, this is also really interesting as well because this is obviously the first Xbox ecosystem device, but it's clear that Microsoft worked closely with Asus on this. Like, it's not just a recycled ROG Ally. Like, they have made changes to the hardware, they've improved it here and there. So Microsoft did work with them on this, and so I think this paints a positive picture as to the kind of experiences we can expect to see going forward for this category, including maybe Microsoft's own handheld eventually. We know there was a rumor last year that last week that Microsoft's own in-house handheld has been scrapped or postponed. But I think that would be Microsoft not doing one altogether would be a mistake. I think we'd have to see one at some point because this is going to be a big deal. But this is the current Microsoft, right? This is so Microsoft for its current where it is now, where it's like they want to save money as much as possible. How else better to save money than to partner with a OEM to build hardware? This is kind of what Microsoft is great at. It's like, yeah, you handle all the manufacturing and the marketing. We'll do the marketing for the Xbox bit and we'll do the software, but you can handle all the production because we're crap at hardware and we always lose money on it. So that's what we're seeing here.
I was going to say the Xbox branding is critical here.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you one of the problems with these handhelds, especially in their current state, if you buy the Windows ones, it's a little daunting. If you're coming from an Xbox console and you're not a PC gamer, getting one of these things it's a challenge, right? Because it's going to be, you want to boot up into Windows and it's going to look cool. We've all had this experience. Every time we get Windows on a little tiny device, you're like, oh my God, it's so tiny. It's like a full operating system. But then you start using it and then you realize, oh wait, I don't have a mouse and keyboard with me. This is a pain to use. And then there's all the caveats with installing PC games and it's just different. It's a little harder. And then wait, now I'm launching to another game launcher thing made by, Asus, or it's made by Lenovo. And I got my libraries and, it's like I said, it's a challenge. But when you get the Xbox branding and you get the Xbox app, which overlaps in visual, similarities to what's on Xbox itself, and my camera froze. Oh no, it didn't. Okay. I think that's going to help tremendously with getting these into casual gamers' hands, because that's going to be the important part here. You can always appeal to hardcore gamers to buy these things. That's an easy sell, but going to your average Joe and trying to convince them to kind of almost get away from a console or get this in addition to a console, you got to really lower that barrier. And so I think this is a big step in that direction. And having the Xbox branding on it will click in people's head like, well, I have an Xbox. This is like a handheld Xbox. It's not quite one-to-one, but this is going to, greatly narrow that gap. So I'm pretty happy with all this.
Yeah, that we should also mention that it isn't a slam dunk. There are still some holes in the vision, I guess. So although this is an Xbox branded handheld, it doesn't run all Xbox games, console games specifically. So it relies on obviously Game Pass and Xbox Cloud Gaming, as well as Xbox Remote Play for you to be able to play any Xbox game. Xbox Remote Play is that system where you can install a game onto your Xbox and then access it remotely on your Wi-Fi connection and play it that way. And then obviously Game Pass is allowing you to stream games from the cloud. But without those, it only runs PC games. Some of those PC games, of course, are Xbox branded. Some of them are Xbox Play Anywhere, which means there's a version for Xbox and for PC. And if you buy the game once, you get both. And so that's still a thing here. So, for example, Halo is an Xbox Play Anywhere title. I've bought Halo Infinite on Xbox. That translates to PC. So if I bought this Xbox ROG Ally, I can download the same Halo Infinite I paid for on Xbox and play it on my ROG Ally. But not all games support that. A lot of third-party games don't. And so if you bought a game on Xbox console, unless you want to stream it via Remote Play, or if it's on Game Pass via Game Pass, you will have to buy that game again, whether that be on the Microsoft Store for PC or Steam or Epic Game Store or any other sort of gaming storefront of your choice. But that is the beauty of Windows. You do get to choose your storefront. So you don't have to use the Xbox storefront. You can install Steam and you can download Steam and use Steam Big Picture if you want, I guess, to do that. And you can go about
so that way as well. It's a good point. If you have a handheld right now and you have Windows on it, when you run the Steam app, they did an update a couple months ago where it basically looks exactly like SteamOS, where it's their own kind of launcher and it looks and behaves just like it. So you do get that very similar experience. The other stores don't have that kind of thing, but a lot of like the Legion Go software has like all the stores listed, and then what you do is you click it and it'll take you to the page and you have to log in, which is a little tedious to do. But then once you do that, all your games show up in a unified library. So
That's
people are
right.
familiar with this, with like GOG and everything, but it'll show you all your games and you can download. I am curious about like, when you have the Steam Deck and it's running Proton, it's doing the not really emulation
Translation, I think they say.
translation, PC games. Like one, and this is above our pay grade, but like, can that be done for Xbox games to PC?
Right.
And two, what are the challenges there? Like, how far are they along in doing that? If they are doing it, like, how good of a comparison is it? Because if they can do that, that kind of changes things.
Yeah, and I think that's what is going to happen. Microsoft will eventually emulate or translate Xbox console games on Windows PC. I think the biggest problem is it's not a technical hurdle, it's a licensing hurdle. I think and especially a lot of these older Xbox games, like Xbox original games, the licenses from decades ago at this point. They have to get back in contact with the original creators. Some of these studios are now defunct. It's like, how do we get them to update license? Can we do this legally?
I mean, how does Valve get around it with Steam Deck?
Well, because I'm assuming in the license agreement for when you submit an app on the Steam storefront, it says, we have the right to distribute this on Windows and Linux. I don't know. I have no idea. I wouldn't.
Yeah,
looked into it. But
I think you're right. Like, I'm not challenging it, but like, because I think that's definitely going to be kind of a hurdle.
Yeah, but I'm guessing back in the day, like the Xbox 360 era and the Xbox original era, the licenses probably said, we have the right to distribute this on Xbox 360. It's like or Xbox console and specifically console. So I mean, I'm sure I think because the big issue is, if we bring Xbox console games to Windows PC, suddenly a lot of developers lose out on having extra money from people who have to buy the game twice. Especially, Skyrim is a perfect example of this. Skyrim's been released on every platform ever more than once. If they had just made it so you could run the Xbox 360 version on PC with upscaled, textures and resolution, Bethesda would have lost out on additional money when they released it on Xbox One and PC.
It would be cool if you could, like, if you own the game on Xbox 360 and they can translate it for PC. Like, you go to the store and it's like, hey, we noticed you bought the game already. There's a small fee for converting it for PC.
Yeah.
$4.99, $2.99, whatever. I think most of us would pay that because we've seen like relaunches of games, right, where they remaster them, and it'll be $7.99. Like you just did the whole Lara Croft thing, the Tomb Raider series.
Yeah.
So there is, I think, it's not hard to convince gamers to fork over a couple dollars here and there to convert a game to it, if that be something that these studios could agree upon, which you think they would, because like if it's a game from Xbox 360, like they're not collecting revenue on that today, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like your choice is 0 or some. We can offer you some, and I hopefully they can do that, because nostalgia is so huge in gaming. Like if they can sell an Xbox handheld and you can play games from the original Xbox on it, like that'd be pretty cool. I think a lot of people would get in on that. So
yeah, I definitely would, for sure. And I think maybe the other issue, I think it does come down to license ultimately, but a lot of these game developers may have, the Xbox console is a lockdown platform, and that kind of indirectly promises things like, the less cheaters, less modding in your game. It's one of the reasons why Rockstar releases on console first, because these consoles are lockdown platforms. It's very difficult for hackers to get into the game and modify the game and make changes and view, code and, all this other stuff. And Rockstar doesn't like the modding community. Rockstar doesn't like the fact that people edit GTA on PC. And so a lot of developers like the sort of closedness of a console. And so developers who did make Xbox 360 and Xbox One games and original games back in the day, they may not want their game to run on PC because they don't want people accessing the game files and making funny changes and mods to it. And, that's their right. And that's why the licensing issue is such a big deal there. And Microsoft can't just ignore it, because there's going to be some or multiple developers who are upset at that and take Microsoft to court for it. And so I think Microsoft would like to avoid that. Maybe Microsoft could buy them out and be like, not the studio, but be like, hey, we can give you a sum of money to allow us to bring, update that license and bring it forward to Windows PC. maybe that will be what happens, or maybe it'll be a simple case that Microsoft finds a loophole in its own licensing that allows them to run it on Windows, as long as the Windows device you're running it on is technically considered a console, such as a handheld. They're gonna figure it out, and it will happen. There's no way it doesn't happen. I don't think it's definitely not a technical question. I think it's a licensing one. Right. Is there anything else you wanted to say on the Xbox handhelds and stuff, Dan?
No, I think that's about it.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, we can move on to the big news. And that's Apple. WWDC happened this week, and a lot happened at WWDC. We could probably start with their AI, or lack thereof, AI. So obviously we were expecting Apple to not really talk much about AI this year because, as we all know, they're a little bit behind in regards to AI, especially in regards to Siri and sort of generative conversational stuff like that. And yeah, they didn't talk about Siri maybe once, and that's it. And they didn't talk about it in regards to deep AI functionality. They did recap the Apple Intelligence stuff that they announced last year, but they just said that they're still working on it and it will be coming in the year ahead, which means next summer. And so yeah, they sort of did it with, they did it swiftly but efficiently, and they didn't ignore it, which I did, give them props for at least suggesting that they are still working on it. And I think Craig does say in the keynote that they need a little bit more time. That's perfectly fine, sure. But then they move straight on to liquid glass, which is has set the internet on fire this week. It's really interesting because in the keynote and stuff, I couldn't decide if I liked how it looked. So liquid glass is Apple's new design language that's cross-platform. It works on iPhone, iPad, macOS, Vision OS, tvOS, and whatever other OSs Apple makes these days. It's a design language that's coming to everything, every software platform they make. And what it basically does is it really amps up the the glass effect that you've seen in software for a number of years now. Windows has it with Windows 11 and acrylic and micro blur effects. Android's sort of getting it now with with Material 3 Expressive on the Pixels. Obviously, One UI and other OEMs have done their own, frosted glass for a number of years now. Apple was also doing frosted glass. There's lots of areas of the system on iOS where there's like a blurred interface or some sort of glassy interface with a blurred background. But liquid glass takes it to a whole new level. They're trying to imitate real glass with it, like curved glass. It's called liquid glass because obviously liquid's sort of curvy and glass is, you can bend glass. And the way glass bends light and stuff, they're mimicking it in the software. And it does look very impressive. If you take a look at the videos online, if you take a look at the renders Apple released, if you take a look at the first developer beta, there's a lot of areas of the system now that render in real time, bending light through the virtual glass. It's very impressive, technically super impressive. But there's something wrong with it to me. Like I look at it and I look at liquid glass as a whole concept. On paper, it sounds like a beautiful thing, but in reality, there's something wrong with it. It doesn't look right. There's a lot of problems, at least in the first developer beta. Now it is a beta; things could change and improve. But even in the keynote, the renders that they sort of use to represent what it's going to look like are also suffer from a lot of these issues. And the biggest one is contrast. A lot of the new interfaces are clash with the interfaces behind them because they're trying to imitate real glass. They're applying little to no blur effects to some of these overlays. And so what that means is these icons, if you pull down the control center, for example, the control center icons will drop down in front of your home screen, but the panel itself does very little, if no blurring to the background. And so you can read through the control center to whatever's behind it. And so if you've got an app open or something, or a white page, all of these icons just look like you can barely see them. They're really difficult to read. And a lot of people online who have, eyesight problems or accessibility problems are saying like, the contrast is too little. I'm struggling to read this text in a lot of areas of the system. And I'm sure Apple will address this. I think this is going to be another iOS 7 situation where, iOS 7 came out and it had some problems. Nobody really liked it. And Apple, throughout the year and up to iOS 8, addressed a lot of those issues and fixed them with the next major release. I'm sure we're going to see that here with iOS 26 and iPadOS 26, so on and so forth. But it is interesting that Apple is going down this route. And it's actually very similar to what Microsoft tried to do with Neon. If you remember Project Neon, which was the code name for Fluent Design, that came about because Microsoft was exploring a design language that could span across screens and XR. Remember, that was the whole point of Neon. It was like, this is a design language that applies to 3D XR and 2D screens. And this is the exact same thing with Liquid Glass. Liquid Glass started on the Vision Pro, Vision OS last year, and they've basically taken that design language and they've applied it to the rest of their systems, which is why you're seeing a lot of these translucent, transparent sort of overlays and stuff in iOS and iPadOS now, because it's a design language for XR. And so, imitating real glass, they're imitating the drawbacks of real glass, which is that it's see-through. You can see through it. So that's not always great for things like overlays. And so it is really interesting. A lot of people compared it to Aero Glass, which I can see that. I can definitely see why people would want to compare it to Aero Glass, because they've both got glass in the name for their design language. But also, there's different approaches to glass, right? Aero Glass was limited because of the time it was announced and introduced. Aero Glass is a technology, air quotes, that was introduced in 2006, I want to say 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
And so it was limited by the hardware of the time. And so if you go back and take a look at Aero Glass now, Windows Vista and Windows 7, which I did this week, these days it's very obvious to see that a lot of the effects are hard, baked into the images, into the bitmaps and stuff. So the glow effects in the taskbar, it's just an image. It's not being rendered in real time. But what was being rendered in real time back then was the blurred glass effect. So if you open up windows and stuff and you move them around, you can see behind them and it looks great. And Microsoft clearly figured out back then that we can't just have these glass panes be transparent. They have to have frosted glass or blurred glass so that you can actually see what's happening on the panel that you're looking at. Otherwise, you're just looking straight through it and contrast becomes a nightmare and you can't read or see anything that you're trying to look at on the pane that's in front of you. Because if you cast your minds back to 2004, 2005 with the Longhorn builds, Microsoft was starting to experiment with Aero back even then. And in those builds, to my knowledge, the glass panes were transparent. You could see through them and they didn't have any blur effects. And that was a problem. If you go back and try those builds, it's like, oh, this is noisy. I can't really see much. And it's the same thing that's happening with Liquid Glass on the new iOS and iPadOS stuff. And so Apple will learn this. They will figure this out. They'll go, actually, yeah, we do need to frost this glass because it's just no one can see anything otherwise. And ultimately, I just think Aero looks better. I'm looking at we can actually take a look at it here. Hang on, let's see if I can pull it up. Aero, to me, is just the pinnacle of Windows design. I still think to this day, Aero looks better than what we have on Windows 11. I love and have always loved the Aero design language. Actually, let's bring it full screen here. And I just don't think anything comes close to it. I just love how clean it is as well, but it's still skeuomorphic. Well, I mean, obviously it's skeuomorphic because that was the trend at the time, but it just blends that skeuomorphism with virtual stuff as well. I think the biggest problem right now with Apple's Liquid Glass is that it's trying too hard to imitate real glass, and I think Aero found a nice balance between skeuomorphism and virtual UI. It's not, the glass effect isn't fully realistic, but that's fine. It's close enough and it looks great. It still has that sort of shimmer to it, and the window title bars still glow, but it's not trying to be an actual glass pane that you can see through, because that would be horrendous. No one would like that. And so Apple just needs to figure out how to improve that. If we can actually take a look here at the Liquid Glass stuff, it just, I don't know, I think it looks quite tacky. To be fair, what we're looking at here on this screen is a mode. So this isn't what it looks like by default. You can turn on glassy icons, which makes everything look white and see-through. I think this looks horrific. I can't believe Apple even announced that this is the feature they're making. But this isn't what it looks like by default. You do get the colorful icons like normal. But the colorful icons, the Apple are doing a thing where they try to apply a glassy effect to all icons by default, and I just think it makes everything look like covered in sugar water. It's I don't know, it's all
no, it
sticky.
looks like your operating system died, and that's the ghost of it.
yeah, that's the glassy effect. Yeah, but they're making it so you can apply it automatically applies the glass, not the see-through glass, but like a shine, like a marble effect to.
Well, it's like the same thing when you're showing Aero before. I thought the clear glass parts around the frames of the windows look great.
Yeah, they really do.
They should still bring that. I think it looks corny now where they try to make the start bar and the taskbar almost 3D roundish with light reflecting off of it. Right, that's that. I would just do kind of how it is right now in Windows 11. Remember how excited we were when they made it like a Mika blur kind of in Windows 11?
Yeah.
So they should keep that. But I do agree with the frames for the windows being somewhat translucent. I think that does look cool. That does look futuristic. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think you should also point out that, you alluded to this too with Aero. When you would install it, Vista, it looked at your hardware
Yes.
and allowed you to, I know I'm not sure if it allowed you, but like you had to pick a level at which you wanted the graphics to work, because
I don't think you even had a choice. I think it
Yeah.
decided for you if your PC was good enough, and if it wasn't,
which
you
of course led to people
yeah.
which led to people, of course, hacking
Mhm.
their computers to make sure, to make it work and stuff like that. Now today's hardware is different, and Apple Silicon is different. But there is an interesting question about, like, nothing is free. And so when you're rendering all this stuff,
Yeah.
your CPU, your GPU, your NPU, I don't know, like, how much is there a processing overhead to this that's greater than the current version? And if so, how much? I think we could probably give them the benefit of the doubt that they figured that out, that their new chips are able to handle it and all this. And you are able to install this going back a couple versions of the iPhone. You can't do it on Intel Macs, interestingly enough.
No, you can. So this is the last version of macOS that will run on Intel Macs. That's what they've announced.
Okay.
I bet it will run poorly. Intel's integrated graphics.
But so, yeah, I'm curious about, is there an effect on battery life? It is in beta. At least they have time. So, yeah, they can modify and tweak this, which, there was quite a bit of blowback on this. And it's funny because when they show the clear icons or the glass icons, or they show the ones that are uniform in color with a palette you choose, like people are just like, what the hell is that?
It is
like,
horrific.
Yeah, like who's choosing this, right?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right that the reason why they're doing this is because of Vision Pro, which itself is kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
It's an interesting discussion about whether or not XR is the future of computing. If you asked us a couple of years ago on this podcast, we'd say, yeah, there's a shot of it, right? There's definitely potential, but it's got to come down to like normal glasses. I'm a lot more less bullish on it these days. The more I think about it, the less I want to wear a computer. The more I'm fine with a smartphone in my pocket, the more I'm fine with a laptop or a tablet type device.
You're starting to sound like an old man, Dan.
Possibly, but it's only because, like, I don't know. I still said it's funny that, like, we literally get laser surgery on our eyes, which still blows me away, by the way, that they can do this. And I'm looking into getting it done because my eyes aren't that bad, but it's annoying enough. People get laser surgery on their eyes where they use lasers to shred up their corneas and stuff, just so they don't have to wear glasses. And I'm kind of one of those people. I just had my eye exam yesterday, and they walked in, they're like, oh, we're going to ask you to take your contacts. I'm like, oh, I didn't wear them. Not wearing glasses, drove there without them. like I'd rather see the world slightly blurry than wear glasses, I hate wearing them. And it's like, I just don't feel comfortable wearing. I'll wear sunglasses. That's about it. But the idea of, like, wearing a computer on my face seems kind of annoying to me, I'll be honest. And it's just like, I don't know. Like, they showed that video of like two people on a couch, each with a Vision Pro, watching a virtual movie on this giant screen. And who was it? That YouTube channel that we like with that Australian comedian?
Sam Time, is it?
Yeah, Sam Time. Yeah. Ooh, if you haven't seen his video on this, it's a brilliant. But he points out, he's like, we're watching a movie on two headsets that cost 5 times the amount of the TV like we could be watching it on, right? Because, like, yeah, I think 2 of those Vision Pros could buy you a really nice, like, 8K TV. So, like, who's this for? So it is funny that they're going down this route of this change in this operating system. It's being driven by Vision OS, which, so this decision obviously wasn't made like 6 months ago, right? They've probably been working on this for 18 months or 24 months, or been thinking about it. But there's this real question about how viable is something like Vision Pro, and granted, okay, they're going to come out with Vision. It'll be a cheaper version. but still, these same kind of problems exist. Uh, Meanwhile, as you mentioned at the beginning, like Siri was mentioned twice in the
Yeah.
whole thing. Uh, and they're completely missing out on all this AI stuff. And it's just like, so it's just kind of funny now that this, what seems like a detour to Vision Pro, where they spent billions of dollars on researching it, bringing it to market, is questionable if it's going to have a future. And now it's forced them to change their operating systems across everything, which, to Apple's credit, not only did they bring it to even Apple Watch and Apple TV,
Yeah.
so they brought it to all their devices, and attention to detail. You said, like, they really did do like a lot of work to make this, which is something we've talked about how Microsoft can't do. We're still struggling for that and Windows. So Apple gets that credit, but man, like this could really blow back as being like, I don't know. It's a weird decision.
Yeah, a major wrong turn for them. It could absolutely end up being that. I do find it interesting. You mentioned the fact they mentioned Siri twice. There's a fantastic interview by Joanna
Yes.
Stern from
Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, from Wall Street Journal, where she's essentially grilling.
Craig,
God damn it, I forgot their name
Craig
now.
Freddy something.
Yeah, Craig Federighi and Joz. I can't remember his last name, but basically Apple's chief designer. And one of their chief designers, software designers, and their head marketing guy. And it's a fascinating interview because Apple, you never see Apple execs squirm, but in this interview they squirm. They're like, it's like Christ, fumbling over the words. It's like, yeah, you go.
Yeah, Joanna. She's still one of my favorite tech people. Her videos are incredible. They're very well produced, but they also just have this like awesome sense of humor to them. And she doesn't. She's a fan of Apple, so it's not like there's that.
A lot of it, most Americans are.
yeah. And so, but she, really asked the tough questions point blank to them about like, where is all this stuff you showed?
And she's one of the few people who can ask those questions point blank because Apple's not going to blacklist the Wall Street Journal. Let's be real. Right. If this was a smaller website like Engadget or something, I'm sure Apple like, we are never letting you interview anyone again. But no one's going to say that to Joanna Stern. So she's one of the few people who can actually grill them on this and get away with it. So well done to her and to the Wall Street Journal for actually asking the tough questions there. Very, very interesting interview if you want to go and take a look at it. But that's not the only stuff we want to talk about from WWDC. There's, I think, a more concerning advancement that has taken place this year at WWDC that could directly affect Windows and the Windows ecosystem, especially in the mid to low end category. And that's the iPad. Apple finally did it. They finally made the iPad a mini Mac. Now it's not a slam dunk, I don't think, but it's pretty close. They've essentially introduced the ability to run apps in Windows with a menu bar, just like the Mac has, and a dock, just like the Mac has, with a keyboard and mouse on all currently shipping iPads. So you can buy the $329 base iPad, you can buy the iPad Mini, you can buy the iPad Air, you can buy the iPad Pro. All of these devices will now run apps in windowed mode. You can make it so they run in a windowed mode, just like a desktop mode essentially, and you can cascade windows. You can run multiple at a time. You can drag them to wherever you want on the display, and it is getting very, very close to being a Mac. The only apps even run in the background now, so you can render a video and minimize it, and it will continue doing that. Which before, believe it or not, that was not the case on iPadOS. It is getting shockingly close to being a viable Windows or / PC alternative. And when you think about that entry level iPad at $329, that's not a great spot for Windows to be in, because let's think about what the $329 range of Windows PC looks like. Let me tell you, it doesn't look like an iPad. It just doesn't. And so if you buy it now, the users, let's say $329 for the iPad plus, what is it, $150 or $200 for the flimsy keyboard that comes with that iPad, or you can buy for that iPad. So let's say $500 all in, $550 all in. Even at that price, you're still beating most Windows laptops at that price, especially when you get, let's think about it, a touchscreen, which is a much higher resolution than any Windows PC at that price point. With now an operating system that is close enough to the Mac that people could absolutely use it for their day-to-day productivity tasks. Suddenly, this is bad news for Windows, I think. This is going to be an editorial I'll probably put together for next week at this point. But is this the first sort of stab in the Windows, like serious like wound that Apple has given the Windows ecosystem in a while? I think it could be. I think if if this iPad update comes out later this year and it does prove to be actually really good and actually genuinely productivity driven and useful and capable, I don't see why people would buy a $600 laptop when they can buy a $500 iPad with a keyboard and get by just with that. And then if you upgrade to the iPad Air of like the actual proper keyboard, the Magic Keyboard and stuff, that's an even better experience. And obviously the iPad Pro, which obviously is definitely a laptop class pricing. But that iPad Pro display, 120 hertz, and it's like, oh, and now it's basically running a mini Mac OS. It's like that's an appetizing, that's an appealing proposition for a lot of people, I think. And Windows just doesn't have an answer. They don't have a $329 Surface or even just anything. They don't have it. That just doesn't exist. Not with a screen that high resolution, not with a build quality that premium, the metal chassis and whatnot. What does Windows do? What does the Windows ecosystem do? Microsoft can't do it. They can't get a Surface down to that low. They definitely, $399 was the Surface Go originally, and the iPad, to my knowledge, undercuts that. It's like, and again with a better screen and a better build quality, it's like, what? How is this possible? What does the Windows ecosystem do? Dan, I am curious what your thoughts on this. Do you agree with me? Do you think this is a threat to Windows, or do you think this is just another one of those things that the iPad gets that no one really cares about?
There's a couple ways to look at it. For one, it's also a threat to Apple.
To the Mac, yeah.
It's a threat to the Mac, right? Because right now there are a lot of people who buy a Mac and then they have an iPad, and I see them travel. They have an iPhone, they got those big stupid headphones, and then they have that, because you want to use the iPad for watching movies on and consuming data, obviously, which is why I've never found a use for it. I've said over and over again, I think the iPad hardware is amazing. It looks gorgeous. And then I try to use it. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I need a laptop, and this goes definitely in that right direction. I will say their keyboard, the Magic Keyboard's $250, which is not cheap. But you're right. There is definitely the potential there to not only cut into Mac sales, because like, why would I need a Mac if I could just get this thing, right? So that's a potential big problem, which is why they've been avoiding doing this, I think, for so long. But there is always that issue with the PC thing, because it's like, but it's also a challenge too, because some people are like, I know Windows, I like Windows, don't know if I want to switch to iPad or all my apps there. And you still got to get all your apps through the App Store. You got to pay for them, versus on PC where most things are free, but I think it'll definitely improve sales for the iPad, which have been either lagging or declining for the last few quarters. Now, what does Microsoft do? It's a good question. So I will say their ace in their pocket right now for them is Qualcomm. The Qualcomm chips aren't as good as the M4 yet. But we know the second gen stuff is coming this fall. And there's definitely two pressure points, right? There's definitely Apple out there, but there's also Intel and AMD, and probably soon NVIDIA, driving making sure that these prices kind of come down. Where are we starting to see it with Qualcomm devices? I just mentioned my favorite laptop is $750 right now, right?
Yeah.
That's not nothing. Right. I mean, for me to say that when I have like laptops that cost $2,000-$3,000, it's like, no, I'd grab this thing any day. So the prices are coming down, and I think you give Qualcomm a couple of generations, because one way Apple is selling so low is easy. You're not getting the latest hardware.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting literally hardware from years ago that's kind of left over, or they overproduce and they don't need it as much, or they can make it for much cheaper. So as Qualcomm builds up their catalog, those chips, like if you had me use a Snapdragon X Plus chip in 2 years from now on a Windows device, I'd still be probably really happy with it.
Yeah,
the performance.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's just like, it's fast. It's really fast. But by then that chip should be much more affordable, and we should be able to see it in something like a Surface Go, so I think Microsoft does have the ability to compete here. They are a little bit behind though, in terms of generations of hardware and everything to make that happen. But yeah, it's like I said though, it's a double-edged sword for Apple, because now people are going to be like, why do I need to buy a $1,400 MacBook when I can just get this thing? And that's not going to be for everyone, but for a lot of people, yeah, that might be the case. So
Yeah,
that
I
said,
mean,
it still sucks compared to a Surface.
yeah, I guess yeah. I've not had a chance to try the iPadOS stuff, so I don't know how good the software side is. But yeah, I still prefer the built-in kickstand of a Surface Pro over the
Yeah,
not having that on an iPad, and alternative having to use the keyboard as a stand, which I don't really enjoy. Like I like having to, especially with the Flex keyboard on the Surface Pro 13-inch, this idea where you can sort of prop the tablet wherever you want and still have the keyboard on your lap
yeah,
is like that's the dream. And obviously iPad doesn't have that. But I think if in a shop, a normal person, when faced with $1,000 Surface Pro and $1,000 iPad Pro,
sure.
I don't know what they're going to choose.
Yeah, maybe. But like I said, though, iPad sales have been declining for the last couple of years.
Yeah, but that could
and
just be because they'd already reached everyone who was going to use it as an iPad, and now they're trying to enter and go into the market where people would be interested in using it as a computer, because that's a market I'd be interested in trying to use it in. I would like to see if an iPad can be used as a computer, because we've talked about this before. Me and you, Dan, we don't need much. We need a browser, we need
right.
email client, we need music client, and that's probably it. And and an iPad can do that now, and it can do it relatively well, and it can do it with the windowing system you and I are familiar with. It's like what more does it need to do for us to be happy with an iPad? And I'm thinking about it. I don't think there is anything more it needs to do for me personally. Not that I want to use an iPad, but if I was just an average Joe and I wasn't, paid to cover Microsoft, would I go for an iPad? I don't know. I maybe I
They
would.
even made the pointer more mouse pointer-ish versus
They
like,
did, yeah.
because right now, like the pointer on iPad OS felt very much like a accessibility pointer versus a mouse pointer, and so now they've improved that too. So yeah, there's definitely some truth to it. I've had Samsung Tab devices, and I feel the same way about those. Amazing hardware. I do find the Tab Ultra just absurdly big, and I don't like their aspect ratio, but I've even splurged for their $350 keyboard or whatever. But because it didn't have a touchpad, I just found it really dumb to use, because then I kept having to reach up and touch the screen.
Yeah.
At least, with the Magic Keyboard, you do have like a touchpad there. So they do kind of solve that issue. So in that sense, I do tip my hat to Apple. But then you have to look at the glass.
It's true. You have to look at this hideous UI that they've introduced. Oh, oh well. So yeah, that's basically all the things that we sort of thought was necessary to talk about.
Wait, hold on. iPad has the whole App Store apps. There's no way Windows can compete with that. So 35, 40 years of PC apps can't compete with on the iPad. What are you kidding me? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Like,
That is probably,
there's a reason why people use PCs and not iPads. The iPad has had the App Store forever. That didn't stop people from buying PCs or even MacBooks. And having to pay for all your apps is not necessarily an awesome thing either. So that's a weird argument.
No, that is the only downside to the App Store, is that it's still App Store exclusive. There's nowhere to sideload apps, which is a freedom you have on both the Mac and Windows.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe the EU would change that. But yeah, I think that's basically everything we sort of wanted to highlight from WWDC that directly affects Windows ecosystem. I don't think there's anything more. So with that, we can probably move on to our last topic. And this will be a quick one. But Microsoft, actually, I don't think Microsoft announced it. I think it leaked. But Microsoft appears that they're going to be giving up on Seattle for Build going forward. So this is a sad story, because I love going to Seattle whenever Build is happening. I didn't go this year, sadly. Microsoft didn't invite me. But in the previous years, it's been fun to go to Seattle. Seattle's the first American place I ever went to, so it will always hold a special place in my heart. But Microsoft appears to not be interested in hosting Build there any longer, citing an increase in drug abuse and homelessness among the streets of Seattle, affecting attendees and as well as people who have to host the event at Build at the convention center as well. And so Microsoft has basically written to the convention center to tell them we won't be hosting Build next year here. or in the future. And so that means if it continues, it will be hosted elsewhere. I don't know where. I think, where's Ignite this year? San Francisco? I think that's where
That
it
I
is
don't
this
know.
year. And so maybe they'll do that for Build as well. Maybe they could take Build to
San
Las
Francisco?
Vegas.
Really?
I think it's San Francisco. Let me double check that. But there's lots of places in the States that
I was going to say, so Build used to be in San Francisco, and I used to go to it. And I remember it was my first experience to San Francisco, kind of like you. And I was just like, wow, San Francisco, like I get the weather is gorgeous and all this kind of stuff, but it was the same issues where I always joke about the West Coast. It's like you have all the problems start down in San Francisco and they work their way up. But there's like rampant drug abuse, homelessness, and it's a terrible thing that those cities need to solve. And there's definitely no easy solutions to a lot of that.
Yeah.
But like it's not a great event when you're like walking from your hotel to the event center and you're stepping over homeless people and there's like that's how I felt about San Francisco towards the end there. And then they moved it to Washington, and I was just like, oh phew. So when I heard that, like this reasoning, which apparently was, I think it was an internal email, right?
Yeah, I think it leaked.
It wasn't like public. I was just like, well, yeah. In fact, if you do look up Seattle crime rates, there's a city data, I think it's called, a website that shows it all. They're not lying. Like if you look at everything across the board, it's basically gone up, including murders and violent crime and property crime, right? I think actually theft has gone down a little bit, so there's that. But like it's true that there is a crime problem there. Now, what does Microsoft do? Well, Seattle is Seattle, but Microsoft's not based in Seattle. They're based in Redmond.
Right.
And they've had events, including, I think, Build, maybe.
They did host Build there one year, yeah.
Yeah, they did do it at Redmond. So there is that possibility, which in some ways makes more sense because you can be on Microsoft's campus and all this kind of stuff, right? They also did 4 years of virtual Build, if I recall, 2000 through 2020 through 2024. And I think a couple of things might have happened. One, when you go a virtual conference, it's way cheaper, obviously, for Microsoft.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really expensive. And you can pass those savings on to your attendees, right? Who now don't have to fly. They don't need to get a hotel. They don't need to pay the actual fee, which the fee itself is going to include the cost of putting on the event. So you can have a cheaper attendance fee, virtual attendance fee. You can attract way more people now who can go to these sessions. So I could see them even just doing virtual. And we also don't know the numbers of registrations for Build over the last couple of years, right? It might have dropped below a point where it's like, maybe we'll go back to virtual where we had better numbers.
I was going to say, I think, I don't know, obviously Microsoft didn't say this officially, but I think people on the ground at Build sort of heard that they had barely scraped 3,000 attendees this year, which is the fact that they struggled, and that was only after they lowered the price of the tickets. So it sounds like they were struggling to get people through the door, and only once they lowered the price of the tickets were they able to scrape past 3,000. But even then, that's not a huge number compared to what it's been in previous years, which, if I recall, I remember hearing, wasn't it 5,000 one Build, or in the early days? Like they've had more than that at Build in prior years. And, that's partly because Google I/O was the same week. And I think a lot of developers, if given the, forced to choose, would go for Google I/O, because I think, let's be fair, that was the more interesting developer conference of the two of that week. But not just that, I don't think Build this year was there wasn't anything really to announce. I don't think Microsoft had much to talk about this, even in regards to developers and AI and stuff. Like, it was very minor. It was very, Google had a great developer conference, and so I think Apple has done as well. Not in regards to AI, but Apple had a big event, Google had a big event for AI, and Microsoft sort of just was like, I guess it's time for us to do our developer show. Let's see what we've got ready to talk about, and it wasn't much. And so, yeah, there was a different feeling around Build this year. I think for a lot of people who attended, it was a lot more low key and not very exciting. And
let me interject here. So, interestingly, Build 2024 had 200,000 registered participants across both in-person and online formats. However, only about 4,000 attended in person in Seattle.
This year was still higher. 3,000.
Yeah.
So.
And if it's just in-person attendance, Build 2015 and 16 were known to sell out quickly. But Microsoft didn't publicly disclose exact numbers.
Right.
But yeah, when you look at 200,000 registered participants versus the 4,000, or in this case, 3,000 attending. And you're right, there were a couple of things. There was Apple coming up. There was of course, Google. There's also just the fact, as you know, there wasn't that much, like, the Windows operating system is not that active in development, right? There aren't many. We struggle to be like, all right, what's the latest Windows app?
Right.
Because so much is done through browsers these days, and now you have PWAs as well. So there's not a lot of development going on. They don't have a mobile operating system, so that's where a lot of innovation happens.
And we already knew from the beginning of this year that Microsoft wasn't planning to do huge things to Windows this year because it's a stabilization year. They want to get Windows 10 users to upgrade. And so we weren't ever expecting a Windows 12 or any radical new Windows features anyway. And so, yeah, it just culminates with Build just being this sort of non-starter, really. Like, they had a few things to announce, a rebrand of the Windows Copilot runtime and some other minor stuff, but it wasn't anything groundbreaking. Not like what Google did at I/O and not like what Apple have done at WWDC. Hopefully that means next year we'll have a more interesting event. But I think from 2026 we might start to see what Pavan Devaluri has, his vision for Windows and the Windows ecosystem a little bit more. He's only really been in charge since last year, right? And so it usually takes 12 to 18 months before we start seeing someone's vision come into effect, if there is a vision, of course. And then there's also the question is, maybe we just retire Build and just merge it into Ignite. Like, Ignite's always been the bigger event. I've always said, of the two events, if I have to choose one to attend, it's always Ignite. And I think a lot of people agree with that. I think,
which is weird because it wasn't like that 10 years ago.
Sure, yeah, no, absolutely. But I think Ignite historically has always had more attendees, somewhere closer to 10,000, depending on where they host it, of course. Pre-pandemic days, for sure. So it's always just a bigger event for Microsoft, and so I do wonder if maybe there's, would it make sense monetarily for them to sort of just scrap Build and just Ignite, just merge it into Ignite and just be like, hey, Ignite's now our, IT professional and developer event. I don't see why they can't do that. And it also is better for us because it means we only have to fly to one conference every year.
Right. Rafael Rivera notes that there was 4,260 attendees registered and made public on the Build 2025 website. That includes Windows shoppers, online only, etc.
God. That's a really low number if that's everyone.
Yeah, compared to apparently 200,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Something's probably off there, but yeah, but coming back to the fact that there wasn't a lot to announce, there's not they don't have a consumer operating system that is actively needs developer input from,
Yeah.
Like, we always joke around, and this sounds like a bad thing. It's like, oh my God, no one's making Windows apps. But like, then I pose the question, like, all right, let's be a genie and request an app. What app do you want on Windows that we don't have right now?
Yeah.
And it's just like, you can't say banking because no one's going to, maybe they'll just go to the website, right? Everything's done through a browser on the desktop. So that's become the main app these days. So I don't know what you do there. It's simply with Mac OS. It's not a ton of apps. The biggest news these days is when an app from Mac OS goes to Windows or vice versa, right? That's the only kind of interesting.
WhatsApp just made an iPad app for the first time. And so that was big news a week ago. Yeah.
I mean, geez. I mean, at least WhatsApp has had an ARM64 version for a long time.
Yeah, the Windows app's incredible, and I really hope they never change it.
And it has pen support, which is weird.
Oh, you know what that is? That's actually a funny story. That's leftover from Andromeda. In the early days of Andromeda, they were working with Facebook and WhatsApp, and there was this plan to build a WhatsApp client for Andromeda, and it would have had the dual screen panes and stuff, and that's what that's from. I'm pretty sure. I might be misremembering that story slightly, but I'm certain I remember hearing back in the day that WhatsApp was building a UWP app and it was going to support Andromeda.
That makes sense. I can see that happening. So cool.
But yeah,
all right.
So that's a shame, but it is what it is.
Let's move on finally to. Oh, that was the last story.
That was the last story. Yeah.
I guess quickly, do you have? There were a couple little questions I wanted to point out. Someone was asking about, to compete with the iPad, should Microsoft include the pen and keyboard? Which is such a weird. I get the question, but like obviously Apple doesn't do that and Samsung doesn't. Like no one does that. Even if you did, I don't see how it lowers the cost.
Also, they
Like,
already do. It's called the Surface Laptop.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's true too. But like the reason why they have that is because if you have the platinum version, which is like the default Surface, you can pick whatever color keyboard you want, right? And people kind of want that choice. Should also point out there are many different keyboards now. There's like 2 or 3 at least, maybe even 4.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what do you bundle? The high-end one, like that's like $450 that comes with the pen, like that's going to drive up the cost. Okay, so you give everybody the basic keyboard, right? Out of the box. There you go. Still paying for it. You're going to still pay for it, but
Yeah.
minus the packaging, right? All right. Now you want to get the better keyboard because you're a baller. Like, so now you have 2 keyboards. Like, this is a waste of resources. Like, why would you do that, right?
And you
So
can't sell the original one because everyone's already got it.
right. Like I think there's like zero evidence. This, and I never understand this as in gadgets thing that they always keep mentioning. There's zero evidence that adding in a keyboard and pen is going to increase sales for Surface. Like I don't see the logic behind this. I get the idea that like you basically need the keyboard to make the Surface completely functional. I get that, but I would say the same thing about an iPad. So.
Good, because where did that sentiment come from? What was there a tablet at some point that did ship with a keyboard? I'm sure there must have been some Chinese manufactured.
Yeah, I don't know. Like like I said, no one does it. Apple
Say, I don't remember anyone.
Samsung doesn't do it. So it's like, where is this? Like, why does Microsoft have to do it when it's like, well, because the keyboard feels necessary. It's like, well, but they have multiple keyboards now, multiple colors. Like, imagine buying a Surface and they give you the basic keyboard and it's like gray. And you're like, cool, I want the $450 one with the haptic touchpad and the Bluetooth and stores the pen and comes with the pen, and I want it in blue.
Like, you know what? You'll get people complaining. I will be one of them saying, I wish it was $150 cheaper so I could actually put that money towards a keyboard I want.
Right, exactly. Because like I said, I don't know why people think maybe if you include the keyboard and pen, somehow it erases the cost of those. Like they're just free? No, of course not. So now you're going to drive up the bottom line price of the device. Now I'm like, so everybody's just going to complain about the price even more, which is already what people complain about when it comes to Surface. Yeah, it's a really weird argument that I don't follow too much. So I just want to kind of address that. Yeah, I think that's about it. Did you want to do a quick thing of the week, which we haven't done for a long time?
I don't have one, I don't think. Actually, yes, I did. It might have already been my thing of the week, but I'm going to mention it again. Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV Plus ended a few weeks ago. Brilliant. 10 episodes. I thought it was really interesting. It's about a rich man who gets fired from his job on the stock market and has to turn to petty crime to fund his lifestyle. And so it's really interesting. It's not a comedy, but there are funny parts to it. And so, yeah, recommend.
Nice. Let's see. I'll just mention a almost cliche one at this point, but Andor, which I still haven't finished. I have 1 episode left, and I don't want to watch it because, like, I'm so sad. But I rewatched season 1 and then went right into season 2. I want to watch the last episode and then go right into Rogue One.
That's what I did.
Yeah, and so I just need like a Saturday or Sunday to do it, but I can't say enough good things about Andor and how amazing it is. It cost $650 million for 2 seasons.
I know,
but like ridiculous. To their credit, it's like basically like 5 movies in terms of runtime.
It is,
right? And it's just the story is so good. Incredible casting choices. Like the actors were just phenomenal. I cared about all the characters. It filled in so many cool little gaps between the Star Wars movies. You actually, what's weird about A New Hope is like, it's like you see Luke Skywalker, you're part of the rebellion, you know, that whole thing. And you're like, where did this rebellion start and what about it? Right? They just threw you in the middle of it because that's how Lucas started famously the story. But this shows you how the rebellion starts. Yeah. And it was so cool how they did it.
That's how not pretty it was, which is it adds a lot of necessary grit to the universe that it didn't previously.
100%. And like it just like you watch it's like, okay, I get how this all came together now. And it was a great conversation about fascism and how even the people who are for it, how it swallows them up too and destroys them. But it was just it just dude, that episode 8, which is called "What's Your Name." It's just like heart-wrenching. Like that is like one of the most intense episodes of anything I've ever seen. And it's just and what's cool about the series, of course, it's what I tell people like about Empire Strikes Back. Like you don't need to even care about Star Wars and know anything about it to watch and just enjoy it as a drama. Like if you just never seen Star Wars, don't care about Star Wars, you just jump into it. And because there was no lightsabers and not a lot of aliens in there, it felt just more grounded. But Tony Gilroy, man, him and his brothers and the directors that they got were just so killer. It's been fun watching. If you go on YouTube and type in Tony Gilroy in the cast, like it's been fun watching their interviews and the questions he's been asked. He hasn't ruled out that he wouldn't come back, but
he's not a Star Wars fan historically, is he? He's said on the record that he's never been that interested in Star Wars, which I think is what made this so good. Like
absolutely. Although that's what Rian Johnson I think said too. So,
sure,
that guy absolutely ruined. I'm in that camp. Don't get me started. I mean, just what a terrible movie that was. But yeah, Andor. You know what's interesting about Andor? It was supposed to be 5 seasons.
Was it really?
That was the original plan, but like halfway through them shooting season 1, I think Tony Gilroy was like, this is a lot. And I don't think, but in hindsight, it was probably a good decision.
Yeah, I was gonna say because Disney, they weren't funding it. They were like, this is too expensive.
Yeah, and that's why during season 2 they jump years multiple times. Each season was going to be a year for the series.
I think had it been 5 seasons, it would have just turned into weekly, what's Andor up to this week, and kind of adventure, which
there's that potential.
Where I think the way they've done it is it's direct, like the story is consecutive, it's continuous. It's like, we're here, we set up this thing, and now the next episode we're doing that thing. We set up this, and the next episode, versus like we're going to plant something in season 2 and we won't revisit it until season 4, which a lot of shows do these days. And it's always risky because a lot of shows get cancelled before they can resolve all of that.
I think there's like talk now that like they'll never be this again for Star Wars.
I think
like Disney Plus.
Tony Gilroy even said like Disney told him that there's no money in streaming anymore. Like it's done. Like after the pandemic, we're basically it's basically no money left, and so I don't know where Disney goes from here.
Which is a shame because I feel like they could have done. It was talk that they were going to show the last 3 episodes in theater and then tie it into Rogue One directly. But like I feel like they could have done something theatrical with this stuff to help recoup those costs. I was just checking to see if I can even buy it digitally, and you can't. I can buy it on Blu-ray in 4K for like $59, but not the digital one yet, which is kind of strange. But if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's amazing. I love that Krennic was back too. He's so good.
Yeah, he is.
Like as a bad, like the people that played the bad guys for the Empire were just.
They're all British.
There's some interviews about that with the cast about that, how they're all British and stuff. And technically they're not all British. No, Irish.
That's true. That is true.
But you're right that there's a whole thing about their language and stuff like that. But it's kind of fun. So that's my recommendation. There were a few other movies, but I forgot. I did see Final Destination, the new one.
Oh, did you? Nice.
That was great.
Very good.
Yeah, if you like comedy horror, like that was just supremely entertaining. And I won't ruin it, of course, but like there's a part towards the end where something happens. I'm like, well, technically this. And I was like thinking I was being a bit of a smart ass and like, and like I said that out loud, and then like the movie turns around and it's like, well, technically, and I'm like, right? And like, so I was like, they really thought of everything in it. But it's a really cool story. But it's so funny, and it was just well done. So it did well, and I mean, it's not just me. Like it's Rotten Tomatoes, it's like 93% or something like that. It's crazy for that kind of movie. But I would go check that out if you can. So that's it for that. We'll wrap it up to some Q&A here with the audience. As always, you can follow us on Twitter and Blue Sky and all that jazz. Daniel_Rubino, and follow Zac as Zac Bowden on those platforms as well. Otherwise, we'll be back Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel, where you can go and watch past episodes. And we're going to even start seeing about doing small clips of the show that we can circulate around in case you don't want to watch 90 minutes of us, which is fully understandable. As always, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
Brilliant. So yes, if you have any questions, now's the time to throw them in the chat. If there are no questions, we'll
Let's
leave.
give a shout out for my camera not crashing.
Yes, that fan is working.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think that's the secret. I need a little fan.
That's hilarious. Daniel, what's your favorite Snapdragon laptops again? Question mark.
Oh, I mean, Surface Pro 11, definitely. Surface Pro 12-inch has been awesome. I still go for the 11-inch. I mean, the 11 just because like it's there. Like when I have it right next to each other, it's like, wow, I got to go for the 11, right? I mean, that's good. But if the 11 is in the Surface Pro 11's in another room, I'll definitely grab the 12-inch because it is so fun to use. But yeah, the other one is the Asus ZenBook A14, which is one that's on sale at Best Buy for $750. What else was there? HP stuff is okay. The Dell XPS 13 is pretty solid. Like that's got good battery life. You can get full HD or you can get the higher res OLED display. If you're comfortable with its very future leaning design, which I was, it's a very small, compact laptop. I think the display is a little too small for me. When Dell came out with the XPS 14, I gave that very high marks because I kind of like 14-inch. So now the XPS 13 feels a little small to me, but it's still a great laptop. And difficult, I think all these, even though they're kind of older, like the performance is so good on these things. Like I said it last week, Qualcomm laptops, Snapdragon laptops get better performance than Intel and AMD. And I'm talking about just in terms of running like Windows stuff. It's just more responsive. Everything's faster and feels better, more optimized, especially if you use Edge. Who else? Let's see. Dell, Lenovo. What would be Lenovo? Lenovo hasn't done as much with the ARM stuff. Yeah. And for Zac, laptop 7, right?
Yeah. Laptop 7. Yeah, and also just for Snapdragon, yeah, that's the only one I've really daily driven for a long period is laptop 7. Yeah, I can't think of any others.
Did you see the Surface Andromeda prototypes on Chinese selling site, Zac? That's your field.
I have not. I don't. I had heard that there were some floating around, but they're in various arrays of disrepair. Some of them are working, but they're not in great condition. And so, had Surface Duo not shipped, I would probably be more inclined to grab one. But because Surface Duo did ship, I don't know. I've basically got one.
I recently read Samsung is in talks with Perplexity as their AI assistant for Galaxy phones. Microsoft has a great relationship with Samsung. Why Microsoft can't make the same deal? Well, I mean, I haven't heard that, and I assume it's a rumor, so we got to chalk it up to that. It could be just a rumor. Perplexity is pretty impressive from what I understand. But also right now in Galaxy phones, I believe the default is going to Gemini. For their assistant.
That's right. Yeah.
So, so there's that. I would like to see Copilot in Samsung, but, and they may even agree with that, but the branding, and don't forget Google being Google, when they launch stuff and you use Android, they probably leaning on Samsung, like you should make our assistant the default one. But then again, Samsung has used Bixby before, so I don't know. It would be amazing if they did, even if it wasn't branded Copilot, but was like Samsung's own thing, and then like below it says like powered by Copilot. Like that would be kind of cool. And what's so good about ThinkPad X9 15-inch? It's like groundbreaking good, and why not the 14-inch? So I have both. The reason I prefer the 15 over the 14, the 15 has a color calibrated X-Rite display that can has multiple color profiles, which the 14 doesn't have for some odd reason. And it's kind of cool because you can switch between those. So if you're doing graphic work, the 15 is just like kind of way better. The 15 isn't that much bigger than the 14, as you can imagine, 1 inch, but that 15-inch display is just way nicer because of it, you know. But I would say it's the battery life. The battery life, because of the 15-inch is slightly larger, has a significantly larger battery, and it gets really good battery life. Like I'm getting over 10 hours of that. The webcam is one of the best I've ever used too. It's a really, really good webcam. The keyboard is not my favorite, but I like it a lot. Because it's a new design for them. It's not their typical ThinkPad keyboard. I do got to get that review out someday, hopefully next week. But it's the audio's better also in the 15 because I believe you're getting, I want to say 4 speakers. It might be even 8. But you're getting more speakers with the 15. So the 15, you're getting more and better speakers. You're getting a better color calibrated display. I like the size a little bit better, and the battery life is significantly better. Don't get me wrong, the 14-inch is still great, but when I have those two things, I'm always kind of grabbing the 15 just for that little extra room and stuff like that. But it's a cool design of a laptop. It's exceptionally thin. It's so thin that they had to create this new port bar on the bottom. And it is an Intel device. I would prefer if it was Qualcomm, but Intel co-designed it with Lenovo, so there's that. But Intel's second-gen chips really are efficient for battery life, and you get that performance. And of course, there's absolutely no potential trade-offs. Although we should have covered that story this week, right, about ARM. Talk about how like was it 100 of the most popular apps on Windows are now full are ARM native. But we can talk about that next week. So, but yeah, the ThinkPad X9 15, and it's just a cool looking device, and it's a ThinkPad, so technically business, but anyone could pick up that device and it wouldn't feel out of place with it.
Do you think it's possible that all developer conferences and conferences in general, Microsoft, Apple, Google, will be held in one location with shared usage between them all? No, because the only company that would benefit is Microsoft. The other two don't need to share. They have their own audiences, and people are happy to go to those events. So no, that will never happen.
When is Domino's bringing back the cheeseburger pizza? Yeah, right. That's a good question. So Domino's did introduce their stuffed crust pizza, which I've had, and it's pretty solid. But yeah, now I'd love to have a stuffed crust pizza with cheeseburger. Like that would be off the charts. But I guess not enough people bought it. But damn, now I miss it. Now you mentioned it. Daniel, last time I asked Zach, now it's your turn. Do you still have your Windows phones? I use my 1520 on phone 8.1 as my main phone, and I love it. That's committed. Yes, I still have all my phones. They're in a box, a couple of boxes actually. Every once in a while in my office, I come across them because I have so many. You know, I have basically almost every single one that came out, except the ones that were stolen. But yeah, you know, the 1520 I pick up every once in a while. I haven't powered them on in ages. You know.
At some point soon, you're going to have to start checking them frequently for battery pillows,
right?
Because that's going to happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Looking at them is like going through, like, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it's horrendous. It's like, oh, happy memories, but you're dead now.
Plus, it's also so like long ago now.
Yeah, it's a different era. Really is.
Like 2025, like 10 years ago, when this phone was winding down.
yeah.
Like the heyday was probably 2012 and 13.
I'd say 2014 because Windows Phone 8.1 was the height. I was like, this is great. Okay. Windows Phone 8.1 was 2014. I remember being the most excited about Windows Phone at Build 2014 when they announced Cortana and the start menu customizations. It was so great.
Yeah. But yeah, that's so long ago.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like if you look back, there were never any Windows phones with 5G. There were never any Windows phones with a bezel-less design. In air quotes there. Like that's
Nano
it.
SIM?
Say again?
Was there anyone with a nano SIM?
I don't. Yes, I believe there was. I think the 950s had nano SIM, if I remember rightly.
Okay.
I could be no, they're definitely nano SIM. They're definitely nano SIM. But yeah, like there's so many advances that just never came to Windows Phone because Windows Phone died a decade ago, and there's been so many improvements to phones since then. It's just funny to think of in that way. Like Windows Phone never got gesture navigation. It was always the virtual buttons. It's like so many innovations that the platform missed out
on. Matt's asking, well, Daniel, is there any way I could reach out to you on some other platform to show you the cool projects happening recently to revive it? I think we've talked about or covered a little bit of that. I would say actually contact Zac, maybe DM him, because he's into that stuff way more than I am and could follow it more. But yeah, Zac's kind of the better choice there. Put it this way, I'm missing emails from Dell. That was a big thing that just happened. I get so many emails and contacts and things I have to manage every day. It's just like I can't take on something else.
Do you think Microsoft will bring back Surface headphones or Surface earbuds as AI devices for Copilot? No, I do not.
Those days are gone.
I think if we're going to get any Copilot hardware, it will be glasses.
Are there going to be any more Windows Unshipped part of that series you did?
Eventually, when I get around to it, I have the next few installments mapped out. I just need to get around to writing them and getting all the materials for it and stuff. I think the next one will probably be a deep dive on Project Neon and all the stuff that they had planned but never shipped, because there was a lot to it more than what we saw publicly, to my knowledge. All right, final call for questions.
What do you think about the power of the App Store on iPads as a product with the new updates? Can the iPad compete with Surface? So we had a whole conversation on that. I would just say rewind a little bit. You can hear us talking about it. Yeah, we definitely do see it as it's both a threat to both Apple and Microsoft, ironically. So, it's a double-edged sword, which is why I think they've struggled so long, and they still haven't made Mac OS Touch, right? Which is
and they probably never will at this point.
Yeah. I still say with the power of the App Store, I do wonder how many phone apps people use on their iPads. Like, I guarantee your phone has way more apps that you use. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'd be curious.
All right, let's call it there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.